going into social media in deaf culture, um, moving a little bit away from television, there's a lot of things. I didn't even know she was up there. There's a lot of things that um, affect it. So when you take a look back at it now, you can see everybody's on social media. Everybody, for the most part, has a Facebook or a Twitter or a Snapchat or an Instagram or whatever you have. But now let's specifically look at Facebook. Facebook has so many different groups that you can join. You can join groups for production, you can join groups for moms with kids, you can join groups for people with cats, you can join groups for anything. And you can even join groups on Facebook for learning sign language, for television production with somebody who's deaf. You can join any type of group that you want. And specifically, the fact that they have groups for people who can't hear you is a big deal, because then they're able to kind of find people, which sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's not, but they can find people who are just like them, people who are deaf like them, or people who want to make friends with them, but they just don't know how because they don't know how to communicate with them. There's so many different things that you can do now with social media. And yes, a lot of it is good, but then again, a lot of it is bad. And I said that in my paper also because I was looking at it, and one of the doctors from Johns Hopkins said, let me find it and make sure I'm saying it right. Hearing loss is also contributes to social isolation. You may not want to be with people as much, and when you are, you might not engage in conversation as much. And that may be because the people that you're hanging out with, they may be hearing and you may be deaf. And then maybe their signing just isn't as good as their signing is. And then you have the problem of, well, it's hard to communicate with you because you don't sign as well, and then I have to figure out what you're trying to say or how you're trying to say it, or you have to write down what you want to say. But the other problem is, besides the isolation, actually no, with the isolation, it's just a simple fact that a lot of times if somebody is deaf, and knowing this from talking to my friends who I wish I could have had here, but schedules just didn't line up. Having friends who are deaf, they do say it's sometimes if it's easier to only speak or hang out with people who are deaf, because you have more in common, you're able to communicate, it's not as hard, and then you don't feel like you don't fit in. Whereas if you're deaf and you're hanging out with somebody who isn't deaf, then you have to figure out different ways of communication. Even dating becomes a whole situation where, okay, we're dating and you're deaf and I'm not. And now we have a problem with communication. And then we have a problem with, okay, now we have a problem with communication. Then we have a problem with we're not getting along because we can't speak. And then it's a whole spiral. So that's another thing with social media, where there's some good parts and there's some bad parts, but it's not just with deaf people, it's with everybody. There's good parts of social media and there's bad parts of social media, of course. And then I went into, music festivals with social media and being deaf and going to music festivals. I have met some of the most amazing group of people at music festivals. I went to a reggae festival 2 years ago, and I was walking with my mom and I saw this group of people and they were all signing, and I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. And it was right when I just started learning sign language, and I was super nervous because my professors always told me that it's okay to mess up in the classroom, but once you get into the real world and you meet somebody who's deaf and they're trying to sign with you and you mess up, they're not going to have it. And they're going to just look at you and stop talking to you. And honestly, it's definitely not true. Anybody who has a language barrier, anybody who has some type of barrier, be it deaf or you only know Spanish or you only know French or whatever, they appreciate you for trying. And my mom forced me to go and talk to these deaf people. It was an entire group of deaf people. And they were so helpful and they were so patient with me because I did mess up and I messed up a lot. But we all became very close. And it's because, as they said, I tried. And I wanted to make friends with them, but I was nervous. And I did say that I was nervous. But it just happened that they're very, they're very inclusive and they don't want to push you away. It's them who we try to push away because we don't want to try to learn how to communicate. And then I went into my favorite part was deaf culture in social media, but then it moved into, besides music festivals, concerts, like just normal concerts. And these concerts are being interpreted. And it started off, and I'm sure it was started before this, but it wasn't as big. Chance the Rapper, he started doing interpretations through all of his concerts. And it was so amazing to see in person a concert that was being translated, not in a different language, but in a whole different culture. And he always said, which I think is really amazing, that he wants everybody to be able to enjoy his music, whether you don't understand the lyrics and you can just hear the beat and that's all you want to listen to, or you can't hear it at all, but you can feel it and you can feel the vibrations and you can learn the beats. And it's crazy because another one of my friends, she's deaf, and I think I mentioned her earlier, and we went to a karaoke bar, and she knew all the lyrics. And it's crazy because she danced to these beats just like she knew exactly what they sounded like. And it's not because she could hear it, obviously, she could feel it. And I believe that Chance the Rapper, specifically right now that we're speaking of, he understands that it's okay to be different and it's okay to need a little bit of more assistance, and it works. And it's very good that, people are more inclusive now. Like I said, we have deaf directors and deaf producers and filmmakers and actors and models, and it's okay to be different. A professor from a school that I found was talking about communication with deaf people, and it's important, and there are many ways to communicate with them. And she mentioned some of the ways, which I'm going to mention to you. And the first one that she said was acknowledge the fact that your first attempts to communicate will feel awkward and uncomfortable, and this will pass as your interaction progresses. And that's exactly how I felt when I first learned sign language. I felt so awkward because my professors were deaf and I had no idea what I was doing. And I just felt horrible because I was signing things wrong. Like I could barely sign my name, and I was like going like this and trying to figure out how to make my name, and signing random things that didn't even make any sense and they were the wrong sign. Now it's so much better. The second thing that she said was it's okay to use a paper and pen. In fact, the deaf person will appreciate your effort even more if you use a combination of communication methods such as hand gestures, facial expressions, and the written word, which I do believe that I mentioned that earlier, where it's okay that you don't know sign language, but it's okay that you speak to them in a different way. You may need to communicate with them through texting or writing, or like they said, facial expressions, anything like that shows that you're at least trying. The third thing that she said was take time to communicate and connect. Deaf people consider communication an investment of time and effort. Slow down, take your time, and ask for clarification if you need it. So let's say I'm signing with one of my friends who signs, and I don't understand what they're saying. So you can always say, like, this means understand. So you could say, I don't understand, by shaking your head. Or you can say, I don't know. And then you could say, let's say you don't know what a sign means. So this sign means wrong. But let's say I don't know that sign. So you can say, and then this means, what does that mean? So you could say, wrong means what? And then by saying that, they can clarify it, and then maybe they can finger spell it, or maybe they can explain it. And then if they finger spell it, they just say WRONG. And then by signing that, saying, okay, now I understand the spelling, now I know that this means wrong. The fourth thing that she said was understand that deaf people listen with their eyes. Vision is the most useful tool that they have to communicate and receive information. For this reason, only speak when you have eye contact, even if they are using an interpreter. Maintain eye contact is a sign of respect. Now, if somebody can't hear you, a lot of the time they look at your mouth. Knowing that and thinking about it, I can hear somebody speaking, but a lot of the times I do look at somebody's mouth when they're talking to see how they enunciate, to see how they pronounce things, to see how they talk to people. And then I feel like I hear better. I always look them in the eyes, or I always look at their mouth and like watch how their mouth moves and everything like that. So I think that's a big thing, not just for deaf people, but also for everybody. And the last thing that she said was use the beginning and ending of a conversation as an opportunity to make physical and visual contact with the deaf person, especially if they have been using an interpreter during your conversation. Smile, shake hands, touch their arm if appropriate, and make eye contact. So that's another big thing in deaf culture, and it's also been a thing with media now, that you should always not just make eye contact, but, like she said, facial expressions, shake their hand, show that you have gestures and that you're happy to be able to communicate with them and try to talk to them in their own way. Historically, it's said that the media has misrepresented deaf people as more isolated, disabled, or dependent than the rest of the population. And the truth is, that's just not true. Deaf and hard of hearing community is a linguistic and cultural minority with lives full of beautiful and rich traditions. There's so many things that we just don't know, and we don't see because we don't take the time to notice them. And I think it's a big deal that we know that yes, they have a disability, but no, they're not broken, and no, we don't need to fix them. And like I said earlier, I want to make sure I hit all these quotes because a lot of them are they're very touching, and I know that no matter what, it's always going to be a big deal for me, especially with learning about all this. But the other quote that I saw was media portrayal of deaf and hard of hearing individuals or deaf and hard of hearing communities should recognize their cultural differences rather than focusing on the medical part of it and need to fix or cure their being of deaf or hard of hearing. Just because you're deaf doesn't mean you need hearing aids. If you don't want to have hearing aids and you don't want to hear that person speak, then you don't need to hear them speak. That's just how it is. And then I kind of went into the Bible and I really thought about it, and I was just thinking, we don't need to fix somebody who's deaf, but the Bible really does say that, that one day the deaf will hear the words of a document, and out of the deep darkness the eyes of the blind will see. And that just gives so much hope, because one day, knowing that we're going to live in a world where there's not going to be anybody that ever gets sick again, or not everybody's going to die, or nobody's going to have problems with sight or hearing or anything like that. It seems so unreal, and it just seems like that day can't come any sooner. I mean, I really don't think that being deaf is something that needs to be fixed, but just imagine how that person would feel if I'm deaf today and I can hear every single word you say tomorrow, and I've always wanted to hear the sound of your voice, and I've always wanted to see how you looked instead of feeling your face so I can picture it in my head. And then I just think, just to close it off, I just think that media and deaf culture have gone together so well, from what I've read and what I've seen. And the fact that we have evolved so much from so many different things, from being inclusive to helping people learn how to sign, or learn that being in a group on Facebook, you can meet new people and make new friends, friends that are interested in the same things as you. But also knowing that media can also be a very tricky thing, and you don't know or see all the bullying that happens. But at the same time, we know that it does happen, and we can try to avoid it best we can, except for the fact that now I'm rambling. I shouldn't be. But let me stop. Media and deaf culture is a big thing that I think people should take a very big look at and know that it's okay and that we can all be together in one.